Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling drained, angry, or suddenly insecure, wondering how someone else's words just rewired your entire mood? It's like emotional theft, and most of us never realize we're the ones handing over the keys. The truth? You're not too sensitive. You've just been unaware of the psychological forces at play, forces Carl Jung mapped out over a century ago. His work doesn't just explain why we give strangers, partners, or even parents power over our emotions. It reveals exactly how to take it back. A few years ago, I had a mentor who could dismantle my confidence with one offhand comment. "You're overthinking again," or "that idea isn't practical." Small phrases that left me questioning myself for days. I blamed them until I stumbled on Jung's idea of projection, the realization that my reaction wasn't about their words, but about the self-doubt I hadn't faced. That moment changed everything. Because when you understand why someone's opinion feels like a personal attack, you stop handing them the ammunition. Today, we'll dismantle 3 Jungian secrets behind emotional control, starting with the shadow traits that make you reactive, the societal masks that keep you compliant, and most importantly, the exercises to rewire your responses. By the end, you'll have a toolkit to turn emotional triggers into fuel for unshakable self-awareness. Let's begin. Why others control your emotions. Projection is one of the most revealing and uncomfortable ideas in Jungian psychology. It's the unconscious act of attributing our own denied qualities, fears, or desires onto other people. Think of it like emotional mirroring. What irritates, enchants, or triggers us in others is often a reflection of something we haven't acknowledged within ourselves. Jung called this our shadow, the parts of our psyche we've disowned, repressed, or buried because they don't align with our self-image. And here's the catch. The more we refuse to face these traits, the more power they have over us. That's why certain people seem to push our buttons so effortlessly. It's not really about them, it's about the unresolved conflict within us. For example, if you constantly judge a coworker for being lazy, pause and ask yourself, where am I cutting corners in my own life? Maybe you've been procrastinating on a personal goal or resisting a difficult conversation. That resentment toward them is often a disguised frustration with yourself. Or consider romantic relationships. If you're obsessed with a partner's neediness, could it be that you secretly fear your own dependence? Projection distorts reality, turning innocent behaviors into personal attacks. Because on some level, you're attacking yourself. The moment you reclaim those projected qualities, their emotional hold over you dissolves. Here's an exercise to make this personal. Pause the video and write down one trait you frequently criticize in others. Now ask, when have I exhibited this same behavior, even subtly? Maybe you hate when people interrupt, but catch yourself talking over friends when you're excited. Or you roll your eyes at a friend's selfishness, but ignore your own needs to avoid guilt. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Because when you stop projecting, you stop giving people the power to trigger you. Their actions might not change, but your reaction will. Now let's dive deeper into what Jung called the shadow, those rejected parts of ourselves that actually control us more than we realize. The shadow isn't some abstract concept. It's the collection of traits, desires, and impulses we've been taught to suppress since childhood. Maybe you were punished for being too loud or shamed for wanting attention. Over time, we exile these aspects of ourselves into our unconscious, where they don't disappear, they simply gain power over us in hidden ways. Consider Sarah's story. She constantly complained about her friend's selfishness, how the friend always prioritized her own needs. But through shadow work, Sarah discovered her outrage wasn't really about her friend at all. It was about her own deep fear of setting boundaries and being perceived as selfish. The very quality she judged most harshly in others was actually a trait she desperately needed to embrace for her own well-being. This is the shadow in action. What we can't accept in ourselves, we attack in others. These shadow projections create our most intense emotional triggers. That coworker whose confidence feels arrogant? That relative whose vulnerability seems weak? These reactions are often clues pointing directly to disowned parts of ourselves. The more we resist equality in others, the more likely it's something we've been taught to reject in ourselves. And here's the painful truth. Until we make peace with these exiled parts, we'll remain at the mercy of anyone who happens to reflect them back to us. This is why shadow work is so liberating. When we finally say, "Yes, that's part of me too," something miraculous happens. The people who used to trigger us lose their power. Their behavior might not change, but our reaction does, because we're no longer fighting an invisible civil war within ourselves. We reclaim our wholeness, and with it, our emotional freedom. How society conditions us to surrender control. From the moment we're born, society begins training us to wear masks. Jung called this constructed identity our persona, the carefully curated version of ourselves we present to the world. While having a persona is necessary for social functioning, problems arise when we confuse this mask with our true self. The more attached we become to our persona, the more we betray our authentic needs and emotions to maintain the facade. Consider how often we suppress our true feelings to keep the peace. We smile when we're angry, say yes when we mean no, and shrink our personalities to fit into comfortable categories that make others feel at ease. This people-pleasing isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. Each time we prioritize others' comfort over our own truth, we hand them another piece of our emotional sovereignty. The tragic irony? The people we're trying so hard to please would probably respect us more if we showed up authentically. Here's a revealing exercise. List 3 roles you routinely play in different areas of your life. Maybe you're the responsible one at work, the funny friend in your social circle, and the peacekeeper in your family. Now ask yourself, do these roles energize me or drain me? How much space do they leave for my full complexity? You might discover that what started as useful social adaptations have become prisons of expectation. The path to emotional freedom begins when we start questioning these inherited identities. Which parts of your persona serve you, and which parts serve only to keep you small and manageable for others? Remember, every time you take off the mask, you reclaim a little more of your power. The world doesn't need another perfectly polished persona. It needs the imperfect, messy, gloriously real you. Beyond our personal masks, we're all unconsciously playing out ancient cultural scripts that dictate how we should feel and behave. These recurring patterns, what Jung called archetypes, shape our emotional responses in ways we rarely question. 2 of the most common control archetypes are the victim, who believes, "I have no power," and the hero, who insists, "I must fix everyone." Both positions ironically surrender control, one through helplessness, the other through over-responsibility. The victim archetype manifests when we habitually blame others for our emotional state. It's the voice that says, "You made me feel this way," giving away our agency. The hero archetype is its mirror image, the compulsion to manage everyone else's emotions while neglecting our own. Neither is truly empowered, because both are reactions rather than conscious choices. Consider the guilt-tripping parent archetype, a masterclass in emotional control through obligation. When a parent says, "After all I've done for you," or "You'll be sorry when I'm gone," they're invoking centuries of filial duty programming. But here's the psychological truth. Guilt only works when we believe we owe others control over our emotions. The moment we recognize this archetypal pattern for what it is, not personal but cultural, we can respond with compassion while maintaining our boundaries. These archetypes persist because they serve social cohesion, often at the expense of individual wholeness. The good news? Awareness is the first step to freedom. When you catch yourself slipping into these familiar roles, whether as victim, hero, or any other limiting archetype, pause and ask, is this who I truly am, or just a character I've been conditioned to play? Real power lies in choosing which scripts to follow and which to rewrite. The journey to emotional freedom begins where we least want to look, in the shadows. Shadow work isn't about wallowing in darkness. It's about reclaiming the disowned parts of ourselves that secretly run the show. When we refuse to acknowledge our anger, it controls us through passive aggression. When we deny our neediness, it emerges as manipulation. The emotions we avoid don't disappear, they just find sneakier ways to express themselves. Here's a powerful exercise to start this process. Imagine sitting across from your shadow self, that hidden part of you that carries everything you've tried to ignore or suppress. Begin a written dialogue by asking, "What emotion am I avoiding the most right now?" Don't overthink it. Let your shadow answer with raw honesty. You might be surprised by what emerges. Perhaps it's not anger but grief, not fear but longing. The emotions we judge most harshly in ourselves often hold the keys to our liberation. As you continue this dialogue, notice where you resist. Do certain responses make you uncomfortable? Do you want to argue with your shadow's perspective? These points of friction are exactly where you need to lean in. Remember, your shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you that's been waiting to be heard. When we stop fearing these disowned emotions, we stop giving others the power to trigger them in us. The coworker who makes you angry? The friend who makes you feel insecure? They're just holding up mirrors to parts of yourself you haven't fully embraced. This work isn't about indulging every emotion, but about removing their unconscious control over us. When we stop fearing our shadows, we become less reactive to shadows in others. That's where true emotional autonomy begins, not in perfect control, but in honest relationship with all parts of ourselves. Jung's revolutionary technique of active imagination offers us a way to step back from our emotions without suppressing them. This isn't about cold detachment, but about creating enough psychological space to observe our feelings without being consumed by them. Think of it as developing an inner witness, that calm, centered part of you that can watch emotional storms without drowning in them. Here's how to practice this right now. Close your eyes and imagine your most challenging emotion, perhaps anger, anxiety, or sadness, as a distinct character standing before you. What does it look like? How old is it? What is it trying to tell you? You might discover your anger takes the form of a fiery teenager shouting for justice, or your anxiety appears as a frightened child clutching your leg. The key is to let this emotional entity speak its truth without judgment. As you engage in this dialogue, you'll notice something profound. By giving your emotion form and voice, it begins to lose its power over you. The rage that felt all-consuming becomes just one aspect of your experience. The anxiety that seemed overwhelming transforms into a messenger with important information. This is the alchemy of active imagination. What once controlled us becomes something we can relate to, understand, and ultimately integrate. This practice builds emotional resilience because it shifts our relationship to difficult feelings. Instead of being hijacked by anger, we can say, "Ah yes, my protector is here." Rather than collapsing into anxiety, we can note, "My inner alert system is activated." When we stop identifying with every passing emotion as who we are, we gain the freedom to choose how we respond. This is emotional adulthood, the capacity to feel fully without being ruled by what we feel. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are, whether the helpless victim, the burdened hero, or the unworthy outsider, are rarely original. These are inherited archetypes, passed down through families, cultures, and collective conditioning. But what if you could rewrite them? Jung understood that true emotional freedom comes when we consciously choose which narratives define us, rather than unconsciously acting out old scripts. Take the victim archetype, for example. It whispers, "I have no power," turning every disappointment into proof of your helplessness. But the truth is, you are not powerless. You've just been speaking the victim's language for so long, you forgot you could choose another way. The antidote? The sovereign, the archetype of self-ownership. Unlike the hero who must save everyone, or the victim who must be saved, the sovereign stands firm in one truth: I am the author of my emotional story. This doesn't mean life won't hurt or that others won't disappoint you. It means you reclaim the pen. Try this shift now. Think of a recent situation where you felt emotionally hijacked. How would the victim narrate it? They made me feel this way. Now, rewrite it from the sovereign's voice. I allowed this to affect me, and now I choose how to respond. Feel the difference? The facts may not change, but your agency does. The victim waits for permission to feel okay. The sovereign grants it. Repeat this affirmation, not as empty words, but as a declaration of authorship. I am the author of my emotional story. Say it until you feel it in your bones. Because when you stop auditioning for the roles others have written for you, the people pleaser, the martyr, the black sheep, you step into the ultimate act of rebellion, writing your own part. Jung believed that emotions we don't transform, we transmit, often in destructive ways. But there is another path, alchemy. Not the medieval pursuit of turning lead into gold, but the psychological art of turning pain into meaning, chaos into creation. This is where your deepest wounds become your most potent materials. Instead of letting emotions control you, you learn to work with them, shape them, and give them form outside yourself. Consider Frida Kahlo, who transformed physical and emotional agony into some of the most arresting art of the 20th century. Her paintings weren't just depictions of suffering, they were acts of alchemy. Each brushstroke took what was unbearable inside her and made it visible, sacred, even beautiful. She didn't deny her pain, she collaborated with it. And in doing so, she reclaimed power over it. You don't have to be an artist to practice this. Journaling, dancing, cooking, gardening, any act done with emotional intention becomes alchemy. Try this now. Take an emotion that's been circling in you, grief, anger, longing, and give it a shape. Write it as a letter you'll never send. Mold it from clay. Scream it into a song. The medium doesn't matter, the transmutation does. When emotions live outside you as creations rather than inside you as unnamed forces, something shifts. They lose their chokehold. You begin to see them not as threats, but as collaborators in your becoming. This is the final step in emotional sovereignty, realizing that no feeling is final. Like raw ingredients, they can be cooked into something new. Rage becomes fuel. Heartbreak becomes poetry. Fear becomes the outline of your next courageous act. Your emotions stop being obstacles and start being the very materials of your freedom. For too long, you've been told your emotions are weaknesses, something to suppress, ignore, or let others manipulate. But Jung's wisdom reveals the truth. Your emotions are not your enemies, and they are certainly not puppets for others to control. They are messengers. They are maps. They are the raw materials of your transformation. When you stop fearing them, you stop giving others permission to weaponize them against you. This week, I challenge you to take just one step toward reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. Start with shadow work. Write that letter to your anger. Have that uncomfortable dialogue with your fear. Every moment you spend facing yourself is a moment you take back from those who've held power over your inner world. And if you're ready to commit to this journey, comment Jung below. Let's create a community of people who refuse to hand over their emotional reins to anyone. And if you think this work is profound, wait until next week. We're diving into one of the most urgent applications of Jung's shadow theory, how to spot narcissists before they sink their hooks into you. You'll learn the red flags written in the language of the unconscious, and how to protect your energy from those who feed on control. Until then, remember, no one gets to author your story unless you hand them the pen. Don't hand them the pen. Now go, create, confront, and claim what's yours. I'll see you in the next one.